There are two critiques. The one we just covered is about alienation, about us psychologically, that there's a depthlessness. Everything is surface, everything moves too quickly, and according to many, we're alienated from our true needs, from the true use value of objects and goods. This is a kind of humanist critique. It focuses on us, on our being.
The other critique is somewhat simpler. It's that consumerism is destroying the planet and the environment. That consumerism per se isn't bad, but the appalling work conditions and labour rights and child labour practices in places like Bangladesh are.
I want to argue now that both can be seen as a type of depthlessness, and asking the question, what's the opposite of depthlessness? What is depth? What could depth mean? Might help point us in the right direction.
The humanist problem, the problem essentially of alienation, has been criticised by people who say, alienation from what? Is there really any true, authentic self to be alienated from? Aren't we all just the product of self-creation, an assemblage of experiences differing from person to person, place to place?
This is Douglas Kellner's critique of Baudrillard. But he says we're surrounded by image and sign and a hyper-reality that alienates us from the real existence, the real true being of everyday traditional life. But he posits no real way out, no theory of change. And if consumerism alienates us, but there is no true self anyway, on what basis can it be wrong?
I think this is true. But it doesn't mean we can't be alienated from our true needs, that certain things have a negative effect on us and the world, and other things a better effect, that some states of affairs in the world are more desirable than others, more fitting of how we want to live.
I want to very quickly draw from two philosophers, Sartre and Spinoza, to make the case that to challenge the negatives of consumerism, we should aim to turn the depthlessness that is central to critiques of it into its opposite, depth. In turn, we aim to turn an alienated life into a more fulfilling one.
The anthropologist Mary Douglas wrote that the main problem of social life is to pin down meaning so that they stay still for a little time. So whether it's fast-moving images or our clothes being made by children thousands of miles away, this idea holds. There's so much going on that it's impossible to understand it all, to pin it down. And so in many areas we live shallowly, not understanding, not thinking, not able to fully comprehend what goes into the construction of our everyday lives.
So how do we pin down our fast-moving consumer culture to analyse it in depth? Thank you. That coffee was £5. That's about $7-8.
The 17th century Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza suggested that we look at the world from what he described as the perspective of eternity. We should examine the causes of things, where they come from, how they function. We should always analyse our ideas, actions and desires, looking outwards and understanding them in the wider context of the world, like a spiderweb. We should look at things, essentially, in depth. We should understand where our food and clothes come from and the effect they're having on us and the wider community and world. And the French existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre made a similar point. He argued that our projects, our ideas, our opinions and values, our perspective on the world should fit together and rhyme. we should look at how things inform and affect one another. He argues that our experiences should fit together in a structure of meaning that we then impose onto the world. Meaning can be made deeper, more connected, more, meaningful, by uncovering and creating patterns between things so that the world rhymes, so that there's rhythm and coherence.
So if I make YouTube videos, I become interested in cameras to film, but then I also become interested in photography and in how and where my cameras are made, what other things I can do with them, the history and philosophy of filmmaking and photography. These are brief references to two philosophers I've introduced in depth on the channel before, but I think they get at something that shines a light on the depthlessness of consumer culture, and they help with a problem I think thinkers like Jameson and Baudrillard run into.
After reading them, you get the impression that consumerism is one totalising thing. Everything gets lumped in with it, everything is just consumed negatively, and that all images and adverts and consumer goods are equally negative and equally alienating. This ignores that not all things are consumed shallowly. Some are experienced, approached and consumed with some depth.
I buy new cameras and microphones, books, a drone, clothes, new food, seek new recipes, go on holidays, precisely because they bring me the opposite of depthlessness. They create depth in my life. Someone might have bought this because they visited Westminster Abbey and they found it educational, they learnt a lot, they found it spiritual and want to be reminded of it and think about it at home in their kitchen.